MK Ultra, atmospheric beasts, star jelly, and are aliens just angels? We talk about this and more on this episode of The Dillon England Show. Today's guest is P.J. Williams. He's the co-host of the Conspiracy Pilled podcast alongside Abby Libby. They have a successful podcast where they dive deep into the realm of conspiracy theories, just crazy stories, history, and everything in between. What makes their podcast so special, and which is why I was so excited to have PJ on the show, is they don't just react to conspiracies. They actually do the work. They do the research, and their show is informative yet wildly entertaining. So if you haven't, please go follow them. They're on Rumble mainly, but they can be found anywhere podcasts can be found. I would be remiss to not shout out our sponsor, Cool Beans Coffee Brewery. This is our broadcast brew partner blend. It's a low-acid coffee blend. I truly believe you will enjoy it. It's some of the best coffee on the planet. You can order yours in the link in the description. But without further ado, let's jump into today's podcast episode with PJ Williams from the Conspiracy Pilled podcast. Make some coffee, grab some snacks, enjoy this episode of The Dillon England Show. Just picking one thing, each episode, and then that's how you get better. And those are the ones that you guys show, which is actually a good transition into the start of this podcast. This is PJ. PJ is the co-host of the Conspiracy Pilled podcast with Abby. Great show. I just want to start our show by saying your show is amazing.
Thank you.
I have recently started to dive down the conspiracy theory, just enjoying listening to different thoughts and meanderings of people. And I was telling PJ this before, and I wanted to start the show off by giving you kudos because there are many, many, many conspiracy theory podcasts out there. And you and Abby do such a good job of coming prepared and ready and actually doing your research ahead of time. I don't know how you have time to do the research with your full-time job and family and podcasts, but I was listening to it. I'm like, this is incredibly well done. So if any of my listeners, just start off, I want to give you a shout out first. If any of my listeners are interested in any of the topics they talk about, they're on Rumble, YouTube, like everywhere.
If you look for Conspiracy Pilled, we're pretty easy to find. If you go to conspiracypilled.com, our links are there. But honestly, it's not hard to find us if you type us into a search bar anywhere, pretty much. I don't know if YouTube might block it, but Rumble is the easiest way to find all of our stuff. And I say that not as, not because you can't watch it on YouTube, but you actually can't watch every episode because some of them just aren't there. So
yeah, YouTube's.
Yeah. When we got audio podcasts, that's another way to find us. But.
Yeah, so definitely, and you are so talented in curating content and then recreating that out in ways that make sense. Because when the subject matter that you guys are talking about, a lot of times there's so many opinions flying around on these things, or just like super, this is maybe one person said this somewhere and you just be able to condense it in ways that make sense is really skilled. So I just want to give you kudos because when you told me about your show, or when Joel Berry, shout out Joel Berry, Babylon B, when he told me to reach out to you guys, I listened to your show after you gave me a couple recommendations. I'm like, this is fascinating. And I was literally driving somewhere and sat in the car just to finish the episode because it was so good. And
it's so funny because Joel told me the same thing when he started listening to us. He's like, I was on my way to the airport and you were talking about Hillary Clinton and the Nephilim DNA, and I pulled over on the side of the road to finish the episode. That's the biggest compliment we've ever gotten from people. Is that they just want to keep listening. So
check them out. So I guess, dude, what got you guys? I guess let's start here. Where did you meet Abby? And why a conspiracy theory podcast? Because I want to in a second, I want to jump into just some fun stuff, but let's give the folks a little bit of background.
Yeah, those are two interesting questions. So I met Abby. I've been podcasting for 5 years now. I've tried a lot of things. I've done things that I thought was really good, but didn't know how to market it. I've done things that probably sucked, but I was learning. I feel like there's a lot of people who will have a podcast that does well, and people are like, wow, that blew up overnight. And I think 99% of the time they've been doing work in that field for a long time. And maybe they finally branded a thing or found a thing to, and I think that's what Conspiracy Pilled is for us. I've been doing this for a while. And then I was doing one podcast called Wartime Propaganda. And it was, you can make fun of the names of any of my old stuff. I don't care. Branding's a difficult thing, guys. So it was a political podcast, but I would bring on guests and we would talk about what was going on. And I don't know exactly how I met Abby. It was through Twitter somehow. We followed each other. We're mutuals on Twitter, And I was like, oh, I kind of like your stuff. And she was liking some of my stuff. So I said, hey, I got a podcast. You want to come on it? And it was great because we clicked instantly. We got along really well. And then after the podcast, she asked me, look, in the conservative space, it's really difficult to stand out. And I said, she asked me what my advice was. And I said, everybody wants to be Ben Shapiro, but Ben Shapiro's Ben Shapiro. And if you want to do well in this space, you have to do something that is not, I'm like Ben Shapiro, because then everybody's going to go, well, why don't I just listen to him?
Ben Shapiro, right?
Or I'm like Michael Knowles, or I'm like this person. And it was funny because I was doing the same thing. I realized as I said it to her, I'm like, I feel like I'm not, I have a way that I can stand out and I'm not doing it currently because I don't know how to do it. And so we got talking about it. I said, well, the one time I felt like I was doing well in that is when I was doing a conspiracy podcast, and I've been praying about it and I wanted to start it up again. And so we just kind of got talking about that. She texts me the next day and says, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just start a conspiracy podcast? Yeah. And that was like July of 2 years ago. And I think by September of 2022, we launched Conspiracy Pilled. So.
That's incredible. Some of the best things happen by someone just saying, why don't we just do it ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we talk about that in business a lot.
Well, that's so funny because that answers the next part of your question. You asked me why conspiracy podcasts, and I've always been interested in conspiracy stuff. And I got into truck driving. I started realizing that I liked audiobooks, started realizing that I liked podcasts, and that I really liked that idea as an outlet for like all the thoughts that I had and all the stuff that I want to talk about. And I was interested in conspiracy stuff, but I just couldn't find any that I liked. And I'm not saying there aren't good ones out there. I've met great people. There's great podcasts. But 7 years ago, like there was nobody good. There's just nobody good. And even to this day, I think a lot of them are just kind of trash. There are just a lot of, here's a conspiracy theory, take it uncritically, talk about it. You're not learning anything new. You're just kind of getting a lot of half-baked opinions. And I just kept thinking, I want to do that well. So I found a space that I wanted to do something well in. And I also felt like I kept coming to different conclusions and having a different viewpoint, and that I thought I could offer something new to this space and do something in a different way. So I've been wanting to do it for 7 years. I was looking for a co-host. I had one, didn't work out. I tried to get my wife to do it with me. I've tried everything. And then it was just when Abby was like, why don't we just do it? It felt like felt like it was supposed to be. So.
Yeah, the angel choir coming like that's, you know what I mean? Like it was like, this is the light bulb moment. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we talk a lot about like sometimes when you see something in the market that's not being done, it's just like, why don't we just do it? Yeah. You know, and that's sometimes the best content gets created that way is when people just say, I feel like I could do this better than anyone else. Yep. And you guys are absolutely killing it. Do you remember your first show? Like, what was your first conspiracy theory on?
For Conspiracy Pilled, it was MK Ultra. Okay. Yeah. So are you familiar with MK Ultra?
Not much.
Okay.
No.
MK Ultra was a very real program ran by the CIA. And I'm trying to remember, it was a certain branch of the CIA. MK was how they how they branded ultra, like top secret information. So it was a project that started off with LSD. Well, it started off that they believed that the Russians were brainwashing people. And they knew that the Germans were trying to brainwash people. Basically, for interrogation was for one purpose, and then the other idea would be to create a Manchurian candidate or someone who you could basically give them a code, and the program in their brain would like make them carry out a command. So they were very interested in this. They believed the Russians were doing it. It's the height of the Red Scare. They knew that the Germans were working on it, and because of Operation Paperclip, we brought a lot of those German scientists to America. And because Russia brought a lot of the other German scientists to Russia, we kind of had these people who were already looking into it on both sides of the Iron Curtain. And they found things like LSD that they were experimenting on people. There's things called like psychic driving, which is where they would basically torture people into washing all their memories out and then try to fill them with something new. So it would basically create a shell. What they eventually successfully did is that they created like multiple personality disorders in people and all kinds of schizophrenia and all kinds of things. And they thought that they could, and this is where the conspiracy comes in. Like, were they successful? Did it shut down? It officially shut down in 1973.
So they're trying to like Winter Soldier people.
That's exactly what MK Ultra is. Yeah. Winter Soldier is a reference to MK
So the
Ultra.
question is, did it work? Like,
that's the question.
Were there people that were like, Is there any reports of it actually
Oh,
functioning?
tons. Yeah.
Is it still
It just
happening, you
depends on.
think?
Well, let me put it this way. I don't think that the government shuts down programs that they find success in. I think they rebrand them, and we've seen that time and time and time again. But MK Ultra is a weird one because I feel like it's easy to look back in the history and say, look, they just give LSD to people and torture them, and then they get these things, and then you have to question, like, who do you believe? Do you believe the people who say they're a part of the program? Because if they were, what we know, like, if we believe the people who were part of the program, not saying you shouldn't, but like they were brainwashed, they were messed with, they were tortured.
They wouldn't
like,
admit it.
well, who knows how their perception of reality is? So I think they come out sounding insane and they say insane stuff. And it's like, you could say, I believe this person, but like they're not by their own account a trustworthy source. So we're always kind of getting, does that make sense? Like, it's not like even trying to sound like victim blaming. I believe a lot of these people really did come from these programs, but what they believe they saw was all on, hallucinogenic drugs and under torture and stuff like that. So who knows? Like, the most famous lady, Kathy O'Brien, says that she saw George Bush transform into a lizard person. and it's like, maybe, but here's the thing, maybe she did, but she's on LSD. You know what I mean? Like, did she see that on
There's
LSD?
a lot of things that could happen on LSD. Let's just be honest.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
I think personally, to take it to a weirder place, though, I think personally the idea of breaking someone down and then giving them a something else is on the demonic. And there's a whole other side of like early MK Ultra stuff that goes back to like Aleister Crowley and the Thule Society and all this stuff. So like, in my opinion, if it worked, like as a Christian, I'm looking at this thinking, if it worked, it's probably because they broke someone down enough and then they were possessed in some way. So there's a whole lot. It's a huge subject. I'm not trying to like rant on MK Ultra. That was the first thing we covered.
That's kind of the question of conspiracy theories is they're deep holes that keep going, keep going. And we'll go back to MK, or we can actually just we can go wherever the heck we want. But I wanted to ask you this kind of towards the start, because that was actually a really good point, because you were like, there's this, but then there's also this, but then there's also this. And the more you uncover, the more you find, and the more. How do you stay sane?
It's a legitimate question, right? Because one of the things that Abby and I talk about often is that you will see people lose touch with reality.
They go crazy.
They absolutely
do. I can't trust this. I can't trust them.
Yeah.
Everyone's out to get me, whatever. And they go legitimately crazy in, going down. That's why I think like a couple of friends are like, hey, you got to be careful with conspiracy theories, because I know people that have gone like loopy.
Everybody who's gone down this rabbit hole has felt the slip. Have felt their sanity slip a little bit. I have, right?
Wow.
I mean, everybody has. And I might be crazy, who knows? But like,
you're like, I'm actually gone. I just can't admit that I'm gone.
No, I think it's a few things. Personally, I think that it comes back to having a relationship with Jesus Christ. I think that having, like, the way that one of my friends described this to me was, he said, everybody talks about going down the rabbit hole. And when you go down the rabbit hole, like, what is that? Like, if you think about it physically, like, you're going into a deep, dark hole blind. It's like, what are people not taking? They're not taking a light with them.
Yeah.
So I have things that I know throughout my experiences in my life and my faith that I know are true. And I don't let go of those things that are true. And that's my tether to reality. That's my tether to my faith. That's my tether to God. And that I don't let go of.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is I think that the tendency from people would be to say, well, you're not letting go of your preconceived notions, therefore you can never find new truth. And I don't think that's true. I think when you find something that's true, you hold on to it.
Right.
And when you do that, what I've found so often, Abby likes to make this joke that we're always looking for the secret third thing. Like there's the mainstream narrative, and then there's the conspiracy narrative that maybe came out of a book from 1970s from some guy who's totally full of crap. And people believe one or the other. But often it's not either one of those things. Often it's something else. And I think that what I found is I'll come to a conspiracy theory at times. I'll be like, man, this is wild. This is crazy. What do I believe? But I know this thing to be true. And if I hold on to that thing and I keep going and I have that light, eventually it all makes sense to me in a way that I've not lost my faith, but I've actually deepened my faith, and I've deepened my understanding, and I've come to a conclusion that is not all chaos and insanity. And I think if you don't do that, what the conspiracy community is really into is the occult. And so they're constantly talking about how there's Freemasons and satanic this and that and in control of stuff. But then their conclusion seems to keep coming up of, well, what if I practice Freemasonry? What if I practice occult practices? What if I got into witchcraft? But I did the good side of witchcraft. And my goal is to not feed into that idea because I think it's a great deception that's happening. But,
yeah, I mentioned in a podcast that isn't out yet, but will be released by the time this one. You know, when you are a believer and you believe God's in control, there's a freedom to explore these things because, you know, at the end of the day, God's in control and he's on the throne, and it doesn't matter what I find out. It's still true that he's in control. And that's just a base. That's a constant base that I think allows Christians to just explore things and search for truth.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I love about conspiracy theories is it doesn't take what we're like the status quo, and it doesn't take what we were taught as base value, like inherent truth. So to me, the Bible is the only inherent true thing out there. Yeah. My history book that was printed 47 different iterations of it is not inherently truthful.
And definitely has a political bias. And
of whatever, however, whoever was made through. And so I love the idea of people saying, you know what, we're going to look at facts for ourselves. And that's why I've personally enjoyed learning about certain things, because I think there's a value to saying, it might not affect me, it might not change my life, but the pursuit of truth is still important.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I'd love to know really what happened to, MLK, or I'd love to happen Kennedy, or I'd love to have 9/11 or whatever, And I think it's just a good thing to do as long as you can keep hold of your base, which is truth.
Right.
And I think a lot of the people that slip and go crazy is they never had that base to begin with.
Well, you kind of brought it up a second ago, right? Like the idea that starts off into the conspiracy mindset is that you're skeptical.
Yeah.
So there's this idea that it's conspiracy theorists versus skeptics. So you've got I can't remember the name of the society, some kind of skeptical society is what they call themselves. They're not skeptics. They're professionally uncurious. Their whole job is to debunk everything, and what I found is that they lie as much or more than some of the really dishonest people in the conspiracy community, because they both have a goal. They both have a thing that they're trying to prove to be true, right? Either what you're trying to prove is that the mainstream narrative is false, or you're trying to prove that the mainstream narrative is true, instead of being skeptical. And I think if you're skeptical of the mainstream, you should be skeptical of some guy on TikTok who gave you a 37-second clip about this. Like if you stack your belief system on top of a unresearched TikTok, and then the next thing comes up, you stack that on top, like eventually you're building a pile out of like faulty.
That's such a huge problem right now.
It really is.
On everything.
This
Not
is
just
why our
conspiracy
podcast
theory.
is so long, right?
Yeah.
Because people are like into the bite-sized stuff, and it's like you might get an idea, but if you take that if you just take that for all it's worth instead of exploring it, we're like, I'm trying to show people, here's a source, here's a book,
but especially
here's an
people with
article.
No credibility.
Yeah.
Like there are times where
you have to
my
look into their
wife will
credibility, yeah.
like, did you know this to be true? Because she saw some TikTok, and it was just like, it wasn't an important thing. It was just, I'm like, well, did you actually look to do you know who that person was? She's like, no, I just saw a TikTok on this. And it's like, well, it could be true, but it's, because we're so scrolly. We're like, oh, next one. Very rarely we'll get this bite size of like, did you know that, I don't know, lizard people caused 9/11? And then you're like, oh my goodness, I had no clue. And you scroll next, and now that's like this tidbit's in the back of your brain that has no proof, no.
What bothers me too is that the people who do this, like I take it seriously. Like, look, our show's meant to be entertaining. It's meant to be funny. We talk about some of the silliest things, dude. Like, I want it to be an entertaining thing. But at the end of the day, I take truth very seriously. So this morning I got on Instagram and I was scrolling and I saw a TikTok that I knew from last year. And what it was September 23rd is coming up, and here's all the reasons why September 23rd will be the end of the year. It'll be when Jesus returns or something like that. Yeah. But what's funny is I know for a fact that TikTok was from last year because we covered it last year. We did an episode on it last year. So they just
re-released it.
Yeah, and they're just like, what he says at the beginning, he's like, it'll be this year. And it's like, posting that you lied last year and that it didn't happen, and you're saying it happened because it's clickbait, because it gets you the likes and the views and things like that. And it's like, we all like likes and views and stuff, but I don't see a long-term, maybe there is there is a dishonest long-term strategy. I would hate myself if my dishonest long-term strategy would be to,
if that was
to
your
deceive
brand.
Yeah, my brand is to deceive people and give half-truths and stuff like that. And I guess other people just don't have that integrity at all, so.
Well, it's also the difference between like journalism that's there to try to actually find what's going on, which is a decreasing and popular thing, and then Did you see? I heard Joe Rogan is suing MSNBC. Did you hear that?
No. Well, tell me about that real quick.
Yeah. So Joe, from what I heard, which was one YouTube video, like yesterday, I watched it. It came out yesterday that Joe is suing MSNBC. I'm good.
Okay.
For $30 million for continually misrepresentation his views. So this is a true story.
Is this about the horse paste comments?
No.
Okay.
Like, well, that's part of the lead up. But MSNBC released a reel on like TikTok or Instagram or something, like a 1-minute reel, where they clipped parts of Joe's podcast
out of context
to make it seem like he was supporting Kamala Harris.
Oh, of course they did.
But he's like, so his full 2 minutes, so I watched the full 2-minute segment that he was talking about. He was talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
Right.
So he was saying Tulsi Gabbard is strong, courageous, veteran, amazing.
Look, you should hate the media, I think is the point, right? Like, no matter how much, this is one thing I keep coming back to on our show, no matter how much you hate the media, it's not enough. They're worse than you think. But like, that's why on the other side, it bothers me so much when it's like, if you got into conspiracies because of things that happened in 2020, if you got into conspiracies because you started to wake up to the idea that the media is full of crap, like, to be a dishonest journalist on the other side of that, to be like, oh, the media is liars and I'm telling the truth, and then you're just as dishonest. It's like there was a surge in conspiracy interest in the 70s, and this is because of JFK. Yeah. And I think most people at this point kind of are on board with like JFK definitely was killed by the deep state or the CIA or something more than, anyway. I think most people in America probably think that. But back at that time, people were like, they didn't believe the narrative. They probably had good right to question it. And then you got really dishonest people like Charles Berlitz and William Moore who started putting out these books with just known fallacies just throughout. And they were really popular in the 70s. And eventually people started to realize that these guys have no qualms making up things out of whole cloth to sell conspiracy books. And then people stopped believing or stop looking for truth in alternative media, right? And then certain thing happened in 2020. I know you're on YouTube, so I'm trying not to say too much about that.
You can say pandemic.
Pandemic happens in 2020. People have questions, and that leads them to start looking into this stuff again. And that's why I'm so annoyed by people who are just willing to get the extra clicks and likes and stuff for stuff they know is crap.
Yeah, that was me, man. If you would have asked me in 2019, I would have said, I think there's some bad apples in the government, but I think there's some good ones too, and I think it kind of washes out. And then after the situation in 2020, I was just
they all suck.
They all are stupid. No, I know certain people that I'm connected with that I know are good, and I know are legitimately good people. So I think like Tulsi's one of those. I think Jim Jordan's one of those. I think there's certain people that I have connections with that I don't have one to Tulsi, but I do with Jim. So, but he's good friends with a family that I grew up with, and I'm like, so I do think there's good people still left. I'm not saying that it's completely, but if you would have asked me pre-pandemic, do I think that there's a organization that's moving things and can shape narratives? I'd be like, no, this doesn't exist. After 2020, right? I'm like, you can't say there's no
more
chance.
Coordination going on than people are comfortable with.
I mean, dude, look at Kamala Harris right now. Let's talk about politics for a second. We'll pivot around.
Our show definitely has no qualms getting into politics. So yeah,
she was the most hated vice president.
Right.
3 months ago.
Still is, but yeah.
But nobody liked the media. Didn't like her. CNN didn't like her. Nobody liked her. Nobody.
Right.
The CNN would be like, well, it has to be Gavin Newsom or someone else because it can't be Kamala. And then on a dime, everybody loves Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Like
wild,
freakily so. Yeah. That everyone, it's like the Joe Biden debate. Well, it's crazy, dude.
Let's talk about the Joe Biden thing, right? Like for 4 years, people like, I'm sure I'd include you in this, were kind of pointing out the fact that Joe Biden very clearly has dementia. Joe Biden very clearly is not in charge of his faculties. And what I find so fascinating about this is that everybody, and I mean literally, you've never met a person who didn't know it. Let's put it that way. Yeah. But what happened during the debate is that halfway through the media decided that this is when they're going to end Joe Biden's career. That they literally did. It was not, look, Donald Trump did fine in the debate. He wasn't 2016 Donald Trump. But when people are like, Joe Biden just did such a bad time, like, he didn't though. He was just Joe Biden. He was the same Joe Biden we've been watching for 4 years. And halfway through the debate, the media decides to tell people it's okay now to see what you've seen. It's
Yes.
okay now to say what you've all thought. And people were you could tell the relief on the left, dude. Because they were like, finally, I can say this
can
guy
admit
has
this guy
dementia.
is
I've been
gone.
lying to myself and everybody else for 4 years because I've been not allowed to say it. So then they say it, and it was just like, that's how controlled
But they're
certain
doing it
people are.
again with Kamala.
Well, that's my point.
They're doing it
Yeah.
again. It's like everyone knows she has one brain
Everybody
cell.
hated her, like you said,
Yeah.
3 months ago. Now they have to like her because they've been told to.
Crazy.
It is like, it has to scare you a little bit that like that large of the population is that easily controlled.
Yeah.
So like when you ask me about MK Ultra, is it still happening? I mean, I just think it's just larger scale. I think we're looking at the old experiments with LSD and all of that
Where
stuff.
it started.
Like where it started. And
Yeah.
because we have records of the 50s and 60s, that's what we think it is. And I think that's the start. Right? I think that like if you get really down the rabbit hole, it's like, what are they putting in our food? What are they doing in the media? Like MK Ultra is not the Manchurian Candidate anymore exactly. Like maybe that still exists. Maybe it's still part of it. But there's definitely mass brainwashing going. And I think everybody knows this,
Yeah.
right? I think everybody kind of accepts that there's a lot of programming through the media and programming through the education system. I think everybody kind of gets that.
Yeah.
And if you don't, I think you're probably one of those people who lied to yourself that Joe Biden was not demented for 4 years and then was like, oh yeah, he all of a sudden developed
It
dementia.
could be that,
overnight.
but I think there's also a sect of people that are just scared
Yeah.
of it to be true.
But
There-
isn't that a form of brainwashing though? Is when you
Could be.
I mean, I don't mean it like the way that other people think about it, where it's like they can flip a switch and turn you on. But what I'm saying is like, if you are that scared to say something, that is that fear is a form of brainwashing too.
Yeah, it could be. Or just the fear of like, if this is true, then this is true, then this is true, right?
Yeah.
Like I think I think a lot of people I grew up with would be like, well, yeah, CNN is bad, but Fox is good.
Right.
But if Fox is also bad, that means I can't trust anything, which means and then it's like they're scared of like what that could mean. They're afraid to admit it.
Yeah. And I think
I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, 100%. Right. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, right? Is like, how do people not lose their minds? Because there is a certain level of deception that people are willing and comfortable in calling out and noticing. And it always starts with, I'm willing to say that the other people, the other side, people who think differently than me are deceived, brainwashed. Like that's an easy one. It's always easy to call out someone who's opposite than you.
Yeah.
But then you have to look at Fox News and go like, oh man, maybe Fox News is pretty darn controlled.
Yeah.
Maybe they are part of Operation Mockingbird. Maybe people on my own
heard
side.
about that. I think the Mockingbird came up with the recent.
We've been
conspiracy
covering it pretty.
Yeah. So
recently.
give us that real quick. Give us a sidebar on Mockingbird.
This Mockingbird came out the same time. I should say, was revealed to the public at the same time as MK Ultra. Basically, after JFK's assassination and the Watergate scandal, the CIA was kind of taken to task by Congress, and then no one was ever charged for any of the crimes that came out. See, this is where you get like COINTELPRO, MK Ultra, and Mockingbird. What Mockingbird is that the CIA was paying journalists to put stories in the papers.
And this is provable. Like this did
this
happen.
absolutely did happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Like,
what time frame are we talking about here?
Oh, well, I mean, it came out in 73, but it was happening from
Before that, okay.
From the very inception.
But it came out.
from like 1947 to like 1973.
Wow. To spin narrative. So they were paying journalists to
Yeah,
like not cover things.
that's
or
part of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So what they were doing is, on one part, they were feeding stories to the media and saying, "This is what you're going to say." And they were doing it in deceptive ways. It wasn't all like, "Here's what you're going to say," but they were like, "Hey, we know." Like for instance, Vietnam. They would be like, the media is like, we can't get into Vietnam exactly. We can't know this, but who would know it? The government would know it. So then the government gives the media a story they know to be false, and the media has no way to fact check it, so they just run it, right?
Wow.
So like that's like the low end of Mockingbird. And then the higher end is like literally we found out that there was at least 400, I think, journalists who just were CIA and then got jobs in newsrooms. So the idea that stopped to me is kind of insane to think that one just all of a sudden went away, that the CIA has no interest in feeding stories to the media and and it's funny because like both MK Ultra and Project Mockingbird went away and then, okay, what's officially going away? Like there's different.
Like they're not going to just.
Well, when George H.W. Bush came into office,
that.
he's like, okay, yeah, we ended it in 73, but we'll end it now. You know what I'm saying? Like it's stuff like that. He was the head of the CIA after
HW?
Yeah, HW. He was the director of the CIA after Mockingbird was supposedly shut down. So I'm sorry, I said it wrong earlier. Not when he came into office as president. When he became the director of the CIA.
Got it.
In the late 70s, he's like, okay, but now we're definitely shutting it down. Like, yeah, we shut it down 6 years ago, but now it's officially, you know what I'm saying?
Well, you kind of saw that happening. It wasn't the CIA, but with the Twitter files that were released.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
You probably do a better job than me, but basically when Elon bought Twitter, he released a bunch of proof that there was a lot of political, like Twitter was hiding certain or not pushing certain peoples if they're conservative and boosting posts if they're liberal and just doing a lot of things to try to sway the election. And I think there's also like FBI that was involved.
There was
some
FBI
level.
involved in it to some level, yeah.
Like it's crazy.
I mean, there's so much government involvement and like people, I use the term conspiracy and conspiracy theory interchangeably with not mainstream narrative, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how everybody uses it. I understand the term is meant to make you look and sound stupid, but at some point I just stopped caring about it is what it is, right? Call it a conspiracy theory, call it what you want. But when I say these things, what I'm saying right now is like, this is all provable, verifiable, certain things is like how deeply DARPA was involved with the creation of certain social media, both with Facebook and Google. These are like well-known things. Peter Thiel was super involved with Facebook in the old days. Like there's all of these moving parts and pieces that have ties to the government. And then the question just becomes, how much do you think that the government was willing to just give technology to Silicon Valley and not get anything in return? Like that to me is kind of
weird.
Insane to think.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so it's like...
Well, it's kind of like you wonder like why are always the big tech companies always liberal?
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing I've never understood. Like, why is YouTube such, like all of them, Google, Apple, none of them are conservative. They're all liberal.
It's interesting because you could ask that question of like, how much is that have to do with like CIA involvement or things like that? Because there's certain, at one point the CIA was very much on the Republican side of the aisle, right? And then there's a pretty clear shift later on that they became really involved with Hollywood and really involved with the left. And we've seen what's happened with Trump in office. We saw, I can't remember his name right now, but the director of the CIA who was like...
Cheadle? Oh, no. She's the Secret Service girl. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's,
anyway.
Well, she was hired by Joe Biden. Did you know that?
She was a former Cheeto, right? She used to protect Cheetos.
Pepsi.
Pepsi, okay.
And they might own Cheetos. Frito-Lay, Pepsi, I think is the same thing.
Crazy. Anyway, so
she was hired by Jill Biden.
No shock.
But anyway, no shock there, right? Like, why would you... You got to ask questions. Like, you got the Secret Service supposedly defending Trump, and the person in charge of it is like close with Joe Biden. There's some questions there to be asked.
Dude.
Sorry, we got off topic though. What was I can't remember the Director Ray or something like that
of CIA.
Yeah, he had like all these communists. So like what you'll see is the leadership, whether it's Comey or whoever, is been at the head of these has been moving leftward in like a very communistic way, and that gets into the whole question of like how much is China involved with like, I don't know where you want to go with it. I've just got so many.
No, I know.
I probably sound like I'm ranting like a crazy person. I just have.
No, you don't. No, I'm encouraging you to. I keep prodding you to do different things. I think
it's all this coffee you're giving me.
Dude, good. Shout out Cool Beans Coffee Brewery, by the way.
Very
Taylor,
good.
low acid coffee blend. You can get it at coolbeanscoffeebrewery.com. Okay. Here's a question based on what you just said. Let's talk about Marvel. And there's something going with this.
Okay.
This is okay. In the Marvel movies, like the Avengers, Captain America, you have this organization called Hydra.
Yeah.
Right. And you have Hydra, who is this like, anti-good, like stemmed from like Nazis into whatever.
It was basically a representation of the SS and their more secret stuff that they did, like Vevilsburg Castle and stuff like that.
But it continued on for generations, all the way to current times. Like it was like Hydra was like this secret organization that.
Well, it's real though. I mean, it's not called Hydra, but
that's my like.
Yeah.
Is that? Do you think there is a a sect of people that belong to some secret organization that is trying to either take over the world, ruin the world, or control the world?
I actually think about this very differently than most people. And Marvel's actually a good example of this because Hydra, like when people say the Illuminati, what they're often talking about, or the imagery that comes to most people's mind is that there's like a dude, Larry Fink, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
Like a dude, and he has, maybe 12 or 13 people around him. You could go into the 13 families conspiracy, but like calling the shots for the whole world. That it's like that there's a council of a few people doing all this. And I actually think it's very different. My research keeps bringing me back to the idea that there are groups of extremely powerful people fighting for control. So the idea that there are extremely powerful groups working and moving and controlling and whatever, I think is true, but I don't think it's like as set in stone one group. Like to me, it's like at that point it just becomes Calvinist Satan. You know what I mean? Where it's like every single action was seen beforehand and controlled beforehand, and it's like kind of the way that Calvinists talk about God, like everything's set in stone and we're all on a track, right? But it's just they're Calvinist Satanists, I guess. I don't know how else to call it. But further than that, if you ask if there is one thing in control, I always say kind of yes, because I think the spiritual realm is like behind these people. Like if you have to ask yourself, why do all of these distant groups in different countries with different goals keep pushing for the same satanic agenda? It's because I think that they have an overlord. I think they do serve Satan, and I think that that's why it seems like they're working together when they're not always working together, because they have a similar. I think everybody's motivated by something deeper and more spiritual than most people would realize. I think atheists are motivated by the spiritual realm. They just don't know it. Yeah.
And even if it's just simply they're just motivated by greed or motivated by
right, but greed is mammon, right? Like you could give a name to the demonic god of like that action. So
right, that's interesting. Yeah, I've always, because I know a lot of conspiracy theorists talk about the deepest state, and then
you talk the deep state's a real thing. I mean, yeah.
Like walk me so what's the difference between like the deep state and then like what we were just talking about?
Yeah, the deep state's a hard one to define. I think that even a lot of, I don't want to say normies, but like a lot of just normal political podcasters have talked about the deep state over the last few years, because with Donald Trump in office, they just saw the evidence of it, right? They couldn't deny it anymore. The way I would define the deep state is the deep bureaucratic, unelected people who have way more control over our political system than would make most people comfortable to know.
Got it.
I think the CIA is like one of the biggest parts of the deep state, but you've got DARPA, you've got the NSA. Did you know that the NSA was a secret group for like 20 plus years in its origins?
No.
The NSA, I brought up the church committee earlier in the 70s that brought to light MK Ultra and stuff like that. That's when the NSA was made known to the American people. It had been running since the 50s, I think 53, 54. It came out in 73, and that what they were doing is they were using the Western Union to spy on American citizens. So the NSA has been spying on American citizens since the 50s, but we didn't even know they were an organization until the 70s, and we didn't know that they were listening to everybody's phone calls till 2012 with Edward Snowden. So like that's the deep state, right? Like the people who are listening to you, movers and shakers in politics behind the scenes, controlling the media through things like Operation Mockingbird, which we know did happen, I believe still happens. That's what I think of as the deep state. And then you said, what's the difference between that and like Illuminati type stuff? That's where I think it's like, it's actually way more confusing than most people probably realize, because I think there's a lot of powerful groups with a lot of similar but different motives. And I don't think that there's I think if you're that rich and that powerful and have that much control over that many people, you're probably not willing to share. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I don't think George Soros is willing to share his political power with Klaus Schwab unless it's mutually beneficial. So I think that they're two evil men who are maybe working together when it's beneficial, but I don't think Klaus Schwab or George Soros will just be like, yeah, Klaus is the guy. He's gonna tell me what to do. Like I don't think that's how these people work.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah.
So you think there's a lot of
factions,
men or people that want control that are fighting to get that control, and there are just different groups trying to get in charge.
Well, I mean, you were talking about Kamala Harris earlier, right? Like, are we? What I think we're seeing with Kamala Harris, like everybody kind of kind of admits that like Joe Biden thing was a coup. Joe Biden went out on TV and said, look, the people in my party forced me out.
Yeah.
There was a whole, the media literally turned on him. If the media had just done what they've always done and said, Joe Biden did a great debate performance and you're racist if you think different or some bullshit that they did. Sorry, excuse me. You can censor that out.
You're good. I have a lot of people say a lot of things are great. But you're right, it is. So that's fine.
But if the media would have just went, you are supposed to believe that Joe Biden did well.
Yeah.
Most people would have.
Yeah.
Like who are already bought in. The media turned on Joe Biden and Joe Biden didn't want to let go of power. To me, that shows that there are people behind the scenes fighting for power.
Yeah. It was almost like there was a Joe Biden camp fighting against the
and then like who tried to kill Trump? You know what I mean? Like you have to kind of at this point.
You have to ask that question.
You have to at least consider that like the Secret Service left a window for Trump to be killed. Yeah. I don't believe they're that bad at their jobs. I think
you can't believe that.
No.
So okay, we could talk about that for 1 second.
Sure.
Just 1 second, and then we'll jump into this.
Yeah.
Because this has probably been, by now. I said this on another podcast that I still need to release because behind. But there are only two things to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And it is either it was intentionally poor hiring.
Right.
That they knew over time, if we hire retards.
Yeah.
They're going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Like we're going to hire people that are so bad at their job they can't even holster a weapon.
Which is really, really embarrassing for sure.
That happened.
Yeah.
That they're just going to make a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just know over time something might happen if we hire these bad people. That's one option.
Right.
Or they're in on it, they knew it, and it was planned. And
I think it's too convenient to just say, look, there was some women and there was diversity hires. Like
I'm saying at minimum it's that.
At minimum it is that.
But at minimum it was someone that did that intentionally. That's my point.
Yeah.
Like so there's never a part that this was an accident.
Right.
At minimum there was someone who just said, you know what, we can't draw too many fingers to us. So we're just going to make some poor hiring choices, hiring people that have never held a gun before, call them Secret Service, give them to Trump, and something bad's probably going to happen. That's like to me at minimum. That's the truth.
That's kind of just like loosening the bolts, loosening the lugs on the wheels of a car. And it's like, look, I didn't cut the brake lines, but we knew eventually the wheels were going to fall. Yeah, exactly.
That has to be true.
Yeah.
Now, what I believe, I don't know. I kind of doubt it's Biden's camp. I personally feel like it's deeper than that or big. I don't think his camp's that stupid.
What does Biden's camp even mean? Like that's the other conspiracy that everybody came to the same conclusion at the same time on, right? Is that Biden has never been in control of his White House.
Yeah.
He was a dude with a pen, and someone else was running his campaign. And we all kind of just know that at this point.
Personally, I feel like it's Jill. That's just me.
Yeah.
I feel like it's his wife.
A combination of the Jill and Obama, the Obamas.
Yeah, that's the Obamas too. Yeah, after they killed it.
But like that's a faction, right? Within the deep state, right? Like that's their faction. So you saying you don't think that it's Biden's camp?
I don't know. I just feel like it's too obvious. Like I just feel like I don't know. What was weird to me about the whole thing was people were shouting at this guy and they were being completely ignored. You have police officers walking up.
They caught him with a rangefinder there 3 hours before the event. And they were like,
you can have a rangefinder. No, you can't. What are you talking about?
Who brings a rangefinder with them anywhere?
Good heavens. And so, it was just weird. There's so many things that I'm just like, and then you have people that are like, well, Trump planned it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I said, like, if Trump would have gotten shot on like the big toe, I could have been like, okay, sure, let me just briefly explore this. But dude got shot at his face 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, you either are insane to try to plan
There
that
is
out.
a 0% chance that Trump planned it if the plan was that someone would miss him by inches.
No chance.
Like,
and kill someone in the crowd.
Right.
Like, no chance.
Right. So, like, the only way that you could even make the case is if it was all stage magic and that what you saw wasn't what you saw.
Yeah.
And I'm not even making that case. I'm just saying, like, you're never going to convince me that Trump's like, yeah, I trust this dude to shoot a bullet by my ear. Like, this is not a thing.
That's not going to happen.
No, I don't. That's like a movie thing, you know what I mean? Like that's like Deadshot from like the Marvel or is that?
Yeah, he has like turn your head right now, and he turns. Yeah, that's just not going to happen. No, it's just crazy.
If it's movie magic, maybe, but that
like if he faked his ear thing or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, put blood packing on it. Like I don't know. I'm not saying that I believe that. I don't, but like that's the only way that like Trump is in on it. Is if it's all fake.
That doesn't make sense though, because someone still died. Like that's the situation where it's like, if someone didn't die at it,
Right.
And they couldn't find any bullet hole, but like they picked up the shot, like it was real bullets flying past his face.
Right.
So, and Quantico couldn't even get into the guy's phone for a while. Did you hear that? Like, it's like there was so many weird things about that whole thing.
Yeah.
That if the pandemic in 2020 didn't at least make you go,
right,
our government is not what we think it is.
Yeah.
This is just, and dude, you don't even hear about it anymore. Trump just got shot.
Well,
and
Google suppressed the search results for it.
It's crazy.
Then Google got sued over it, and they're still suppressing things worse than they've ever. I mean, we are in full election mode right now when it comes to Google and Instagram and I mean, it's really bad. We had 5 videos. I personally, I guess I should say, had 5 videos taken down in a 2-week time span. From some of them were from Conspiracy Pilled, and some of them for old podcasts I forgot were still on the internet.
Wow.
And I just was getting emails saying like, "Oh, your old podcast, like Wartime Propaganda, or this other one that you
on
said
YouTube?
some." Yeah, it was So I just kept getting things taken down because it's like you can see that we're getting into the election season.
Oh yeah.
Certain things are not allowed anymore.
It's just what I stumbled because I'm like. Oh, did you hear that? It's
Yeah,
a little coffee burp. That was
that
amazing.
you?
Yeah, that was me. I like had this like thing just well up from the deep part of my soul, the deep state of my being. I'll edit that out. It's just crazy to think that our government is not what we think it is, which we'll probably pivot to maybe a little lighter issues here in a little bit. I'll say this. I might clip this out. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. But remember earlier I was talking about Candace and some things she said, and people have given her like tons of hate for all this stuff. And I haven't dug deep, and some of the stuff I think is potentially off the wall. But what was interesting to me is something she said was she's been on this like Bolshevik kick of the ethnic cleansing of Germans after World War II. I don't know if you followed this at all.
I haven't been following Candace lately, but I probably understand I probably have heard some of the things.
So, and
she's
if I
talking
butcher
about.
this, and you can't, I'm sorry, but like this is just what I've perused on Twitters from her clips. Basically, after World War II, there was a ethnic cleaning of Germans
in Eastern.
Like the Russians came and just slaughtered hundreds of thousands of Germans after the war. The war is done, and they just come and just kill hundreds of thousands of Jews. And there's a documentary on this, apparently, which I haven't watched. I don't know much about it. That's all I know. That's like all I know of this situation. But the point was, history is written by the victors. That was her point. So whoever wins stuff, they write the history books. They're the ones that get to control the narrative of what happened over there. And it may, like, I don't know if it's true. I don't know, whatever. But my point is, there's enough there that makes me think back then, when we look at our old history before cell phones and before you can kind of monitor the war in Ukraine on Twitter and see like drones flying.
And even then,
you just don't know what's true.
Like the Ghost of Kiev thing wasn't true.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
But my point is, like, how much has never been shared and never seen the light of day that our government's been part of, and then how much has just been spun to, we've just believed this to be true, but there's no proof behind it. It was just what was in our textbooks. It's what we were told to believe, and it just never happened, or massive things did happen,
right,
that we never were told.
I think the truth has a funny way of getting out a little bit more than some people will think, but I 100% agree with this. Like, how do I say this? The notion that history is written by the victors is, I think it's generally true. I think it's a little bit oversold sometimes, where it's like there are things that we do have evidence for. There are narratives and stories and things that have gotten through from people who are not the victors. We have, especially in modern times, there's like certain things, and you still got to question it all. But yeah, I mean, there's huge parts of history that we've just kind of got a narrative on. It makes sorting through all this stuff really difficult.
Yeah. And by the way,
you kind of got to be a historian to be a conspiracy theorist.
Right. You need to love history. And by the way, I'm not at all suggesting, I don't know, that we were wrong. Like I'm not, like, my grandpa fought in World War II. And like, I'm not.
Well, that's
trying
to me, like, that's back to what I was saying is like, we do have,
Absolutely.
survivors, soldiers, people
Yes.
on the ground. And those people I think are more trustworthy than like a government narrative.
Correct. It was
But
just
yeah.
an example. And I don't know anything. Like I personally.
Well, there's so much about Russia in that time that I'd love to know that I think we don't know.
Right.
You know
That's
what
all
I mean?
that's my point.
Like Russia with their cleansing and the I shouldn't say gulags. The Lubyanka basement is something to look into. Like,
What was it called? I'm sorry.
the Lubyanka basement, it's where they would take people and they'd line them up 6 at a time, shoot them in the head, and they would go down an elevator and up into a truck. And they just did it all day, every day.
No.
Like, oh yeah. Like they were just executing people in this basement all day, every day. So like at nighttime, people would be in their homes and they couldn't sleep because they didn't know if the secret police were just going to kick in their door. And that was the time. Oh, in Russia. Yeah, absolutely. Under Stalin.
Yeah.
So like they didn't know if they were acting too enthusiastic about the government. So they would be suspicious, or not enthusiastic enough. You know,
They're killing their own citizens.
Oh yeah, man.
Wow.
There was a Jewish cleansing that happened in Russia that a lot of people don't know about because we only think that Hitler did it. There was, cleansing of Catholics in Russia in a huge way. If you read about the Catholic accounts of survivors, I mean, I'm not saying, look, this, like I know people want to compare it. I'm not saying worse than Hitler because Hitler wasn't bad, but like it mirrors at least as bad, if not worse, of the stories you've heard coming out of
like Nazi Germany.
Nazi Germany. Like and I don't think that most people know just how bad like Stalinist Russia was. Because there's so little that has survived, and what has survived is like horrific. Yeah,
Crazy.
But what's the
it's
difference there, right? Is we took over Germany, right?
Yeah.
We freed people from the concentration camps. We got their stories. With Russia, we just got like leaks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We have no idea how like truly bad it was.
I'm gonna butcher. I feel like there was someone at the college that I graduated from whose parents or grandparents escaped Russia persecution as a Christian. And it's true. Like there are these stories of just awful atrocities.
Well, Russia was an atheist, literally atheist-run government. So like you had to be atheist, or
pretty much you had to worship Stalin.
You had to worship the state.
Yeah.
As atheist doesn't even cover it. It was a government worship cult.
Yeah.
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 You had to worship Stalin. It's kind of like North Korea today. Very similar.
You see the guy in the Olympics that dressed up as
It's hilarious. I saw that. I was like, I hope that guy's okay.
I know. I was nervous for him, dude. I'm like, there's no chance.
The balls on that guy, though.
Oh,
that's
massive.
So funny.
He's a wheelbarrow just to walk around.
That was
carry
probably
them in.
It was that and the Turkish shooter were the two best parts of the Olympics. Nothing, everything else sucked.
Yeah.
Especially the breakdancing.
Did you see that one chick that just bombed? She got a score of 0.
Are we talking about the breakdancer?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah. It was terrible.
Memes. Oh, man, it's off. I didn't know breakdancing was a part of the Olympics.
New
till
this year.
Is it?
New this year.
Probably never do it again. It was awful.
It was something. I'll tell you what. Anyway, so yeah, that's crazy. I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
I knew it was bad, but I guess the point, it sheds the point. Like we think of Germany did awful things, terrible things. Hitler was a bad person, awful, terrible person who killed. If anyone's ever gone to U.S. the capital, Washington D.C., and they go to the I'm blanking. Why can't I think of the museum?
Yep.
You know what I'm talking about?
I'm blanking on it too, man.
We
The Holocaust Remembrance or something
the
like that?
Holocaust Museum.
Yeah.
It is sobering and real.
Yeah.
And it's not fake. It's an awful thing. But to think that has potentially happened at that scale in other countries that we just have no idea.
Well, that actually brings up a good point, right? Like talking a little bit of history for a minute. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, so I apologize for that. But there was a journalist for the New York Times in the 30s or 40s. And he was a Nobel, is that the right one? He was a
Nobel Peace Prize?
Pulitzer Prize. Is that what it is?
Pulitzer.
He's a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. And he was good friends with Stalin. Stalin was paying him to lie about the Ukrainian massacre. A lot of people still don't know about this. It's not really taught in school very much. But essentially, during this time when Russia was our sort of ally during World War II against Germany, they basically closed off parts of Ukraine and starved them to death. It was a famine. Millions of people died. A horrible, awful thing. And there was a journalist for the New York Times who won awards for lying about the famine until it was done, until these people were dead. So the American people were like, oh, nothing, Ukraine's good. Everything's great over there. Stalin's treating these people super well. And then it comes out later that this guy was friends with Stalin. He was friends with Aleister Crowley, which is a whole nother rabbit hole. just this evil, awful person. And during his time, when people are supposed to trust him, when he's given awards for his great journalism, he's deceiving the entire world about a literal genocide. So it's like one of those things is like, even though I think truth often does get out, it's scary to think about like the consequences of it not getting out fast enough. Because like what happens when the whole world believes that Ukraine is good and we're sending, aid possibly to Russia is like during that time,
Yeah.
And I think I keep thinking about this too with like what's happening today, like at this time, our media was super friendly to Stalin. Our media was telling us that Stalin was this great guy, and because he was opposed to Hitler. And I keep saying this about the Ukraine-Russia thing where it's like everybody wants to pick sides. I'm like, man, I just think they're both probably awful.
Yeah.
Like you've literally got Nazis in Ukraine.
Yep.
And you've got, like not communists exactly, but still, you still got Russia as like this gangster autocracy. It's like this awful.
Well, it's still like same thing. You need to worship Putin to a degree.
It's still awful, right? And it's like I find it funny that people are trying to make a case for like Zelensky's this great guy or Putin's this great guy. And I'm like, man, I don't know. I'm not saying they're on the level
Call me
of
old
Stalin
school,
and
but
Hitler.
I think Americans are pretty cool too. Let's just start here first.
That's my point,
dude. What absolutely pissed me off about the Ukraine-Russia thing. I'm like, listen, we pick our allies. We want to help people out.
Sure.
We're whatever. Like, I'm not always going to agree with who we decide to help out or whatever. That is part of American politics. We always feel like we're the bigger brother.
As long as we're the world police, it's going to keep happening.
Yeah. Okay, so whatever. The moment that I absolutely like got angry was right after the Maui fires conspiracy theory that we talked about.
We did cover that.
The Maui fires, which we all know were not an accident, but the White House sent $300 to all the families. And like 2 or 3 days afterwards, after the fires, Joe Biden goes before Congress and asks for a couple more billion to be sent to Ukraine. Not to Maui, not to our own U.S. citizens. He asked for billions of dollars to be sent to Ukraine.
Right.
And then asked for $300 a family to go to Hawaii, our own people.
Yeah.
And that was the moment that our politicians are more concerned for whatever reason, whether it's money laundering, whether it's whatever the reason is we're doing this with Ukraine, which I actually don't believe anyone really knows.
I think part of it at minimum is money laundering. We've covered it on the show. I mean,
there was something else I heard.
It's I don't know how deep you want to get into it, but I think it's three major things
For the Ukraine stuff?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, two of them we know for a fact, right? One of them is money laundering. It's kind of come out. Trying to remember the story, but we basically sent them $4 billion worth of firearms and said it was $6 billion. And then there's all this. It's a long, complicated thing. I don't want to get into, but like we've kind of got proof of the money laundering aspect. We know that politicians, do this anyway. My point is, there's that, and then there's remember when they said there's no chemical weapons labs in Ukraine. Do you remember that story? And then it's like, okay, they like gave it a different name. America. My point is, Ukraine has been a corrupt country at the behest of countries like America for a long time. Fauci, isn't that where Fauci did the Beagle thing, or is that somewhere else?
I don't know.
They use other countries.
It's above my pay grade of knowledge.
Well, think about what we do know about like Cuba, for example, right? We've got Guantanamo Bay, we've got black sites in different parts of the world, things that we can't do on U.S. soil, we do in other countries, and Ukraine just happens to be one of the countries that we do things that we can't do on U.S. soil. One of them that came out was that we do absolutely do chemical weapon testing in Ukraine. Like that, there was I think it was 9 labs that came out that we were using that the media told us over and over and over and over they're not doing. And then, of course, money laundering. And I think the third one is trafficking. There's like a huge trafficking is a real problem in Ukraine. So like I can see the interest of corrupt politicians to want to protect their playground. That's how I've just looked at it. I think it's a playground for dark DARPA money, dark CIA projects, and political favors and money laundering and stuff like that.
And I don't know if this is true. A fourth thing, I also heard that Ukraine is one of the world's largest marijuana producers.
Oh, it probably. Who knows?
And I it could be true. Someone fact check me, please. But that was also like we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that our hold on it. Kind of similar to the oil Middle East thing.
Well, in the Middle East too, people forget that it was heroin as well. Like there was heroin trafficking that was being done and stuff like that. So
crazy. Yeah, dude, it's but those Maui fires, man, that that whole situation when Biden
All of a
after
sudden,
ignored
FEMA
that,
doesn't have money to,
yeah, but we have money for, and we still have since then given billions to Ukraine.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like, dude, like what ticks me off about listen, you can hate Trump. That's fine. I don't care. He's a polarizing figure. I don't love everything about him. You can hate him for, whatever reason in your brain you hate Trump. That's okay. You can even think Trump's Stalin. I don't care. There's people that's fine. I think you're wrong, but you can think that. What I can't stand is when people pretend Biden's innocent.
Right.
Like it's like you saying Trump's awful and Joe Biden's good when Joe Biden is doing these things, ignoring the American public, ignoring these like our own people and the government. And no, it's not Joe necessarily, but he's the one requesting money for Ukraine. It's like, dude, like our own people in Hawaii are dying, or they couldn't even. So for people that want to listen to it, there's a Joe Rogan podcast with Tulsi Gabbard, and then a local Hawaiian like mayor or government official from Hawaii. So Tulsi Gabbard's from Hawaii, and so is this other individual who lived on Maui.
Right.
And he was recounting all of the actual things that were happening on that island. Like after the fire, the government wasn't letting people go back to their homes.
Right. Yeah.
They weren't letting them back to. And in Hawaii, they didn't have banks. They don't use banks as well. So everything that they own is at their homes, that they're not allowed to go to their own property. There's so, and then you have the whole like Oprah, their stuff was fine. And just it's that whole thing's crazy.
It's a deep conspiracy theory, and there's a lot of weirdness there. And I feel like it's unfortunate that I think most people have moved on because that is kind of how they get away with whatever is happening. I mean, I think the fires were set on purpose 100%. You can argue whether it was lasers or not. Like that's another thing. And maybe it was. I mean, we have the technology to start fires with lasers. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's just something that people, who knows? They could start a fire a million different ways. It doesn't have to be a laser. But what's going to happen eventually is you'll see Maui change. And then by the time that it changes and everybody said, hey, did they just burn down the ancestral home of a bunch of Hawaiians so they could build a smart city? As soon as smart city's there, it's like, well, we had to rebuild. You all said that that's what we were doing it for, but how else were we going to rebuild? It just doesn't matter. They just get away with it over and over.
Crazy.
I truly think that's what they're going to do with it. I think they're going to use it as a smart city plan.
Or more resorts or something.
Politicians will have their homes and they'll be able to buy more land. Or not politicians, rich celebrities will have bigger homes.
There was a water
more
issue
land,
too. So basically,
it's a historic site of all these things that they couldn't tear down.
Yeah.
But if it gets burnt down, and the people whose homes were burnt down now only have $300 in their pocket, what are they going to do? They're going to sell their land to.
It was illegal for them to plant new trees because and it's a naturally rich, soil-rich place. So they used to be able to live off the land.
Volcanic ash and stuff.
And
like
so
that,
now they're trying to make the Hawaiians depend on the government, and it's just crazy stuff. It is crazy.
If you look into the Dole Banana Company and what that where you get the idea of a banana republic and what happened, 140 years ago, it just looks like the same. It's just here's a small island nation. We can take it over and use it for big business. I just think it's the same thing playing out all over again. And that's why I think you have to be a fan of history. It's like sometimes the patterns do repeat. Sometimes the motivations become more clear when you see how other people have used similar situations to get what they want. And a lot of these conspiracies eventually do come out. So it's like sometimes you're theorizing about, hey, here's what happened in the past. It worked then. Would it work now? Are they how would it change? But when you know that it's possible that people are evil enough to do these things and have successfully done these things in the past, it just kind of makes more sense.
Yeah. So my history teacher, I always remember from high school, said those who don't learn from history are destined to repeat it. And if you're not willing to look at certain things, and like I said, I could be wrong about the whole Maui thing, and that's okay. I'll eat it if it comes out that it was legitimately an accidental thing, and whatever, I'll eat that. That's fine.
Sure.
But I also look at facts.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, and again, if it is just an accident, it's like the minimum you could say is our government is not helping the people who they should help.
At minimum.
What are we paying for FEMA for if they're not going to
actually step in there and
actually
do
their job?
Or they were turning down volunteers and not letting them in there. Like there's just a lot of, and the alarms didn't go off. And there was just so much. We had friends on the island.
Did you?
Yeah, that escape.
Yeah.
She literally put a picture of her story of fires. They were literally one of the people
at minimum, Maui is a reason why you should distrust your government, whether you believe the conspiracy theories or not, because they stopped aid from regular people and allowed like they're like, nope, we have to do this and that and the other, and you can't help your neighbor. And we're actually going to step in at a time where people are starving, at a time where people are homeless, at a time where people don't have clean water. And we're going to stop neighbors from helping neighbors because our slow moving BS bureaucracy has got to do it this way. And it doesn't matter who it hurts. And that's exactly what happened in Maui. Did you see the people on jet skis, like taking diapers to people?
Yeah.
Because they couldn't.
And they were getting in trouble.
They were. They had to like ride the jet ski up close to the beach and like chuck the box because they could get arrested for giving diapers to people whose homes burnt down who were trying to take care of their kids. Like that's the bureaucracy. Like that's the problem.
That's the stuff that if you believe that, if you say out loud that's what happened, then you're labeled as a crazy.
Yeah.
You're labeled and it's just not true. We're back.
All right.
Sorry, we had to take a potty break. Actually, I did. I initiated it, which is amazing because you've drinking more coffee than I have.
I've just been going through this coffee, man.
And I was like, I'm dying. I feel like you're soon going to need to be dying. And so we just took a little break there for a second. We got into a political vein, which is great because I wanted to get your takes on those things. But I wanted to kind of start the second segment of the show with maybe a little bit more whatever you want. You have covered so many. How many conspiracy theories at this point do you think you've covered?
So that's actually kind of hard to so
with Conspiracy Pilled.
Yeah, no. We're almost wrapping up our 4th season. We kind of do it similar to, we don't do one season a year. We take a break twice a year. So we take a week off after basically 6 months, and then we start a new season. So 2 years into the podcast, we're finishing season 4. We're going to start season 5 in September of this year. And we do about 26, 27 episodes per season. Plus we do Unhinged, so we do 2 episodes a week. It's really, how many is that? It's over 100.
Yeah.
It's over 100. Some of them have been 2 or 3 parters. When we covered Tartaria, which is like a big hot
yeah, you talked about that.
We did a 3-parter. When I covered Mockingbird, I did a 3-parter because there's the history part that I told you, which is the media controlled by the CIA. And then there's Hollywood controlled by the CIA, which is also super well documented. There's a guy named Chase Brandon who went to Hollywood and like inserted all the CIA propaganda to Hollywood scripts. That's well documented. And then I kind of talked about like where are we at today with like social media influencers or some of them paid by the government. So I don't know. I mean, over 100. Sometimes we'll do shows where we just react to, like last night we did a show where people send us TikToks and we react to them and give our opinions. So we hit a lot of different things like demon face syndrome. We talked about last night. Have you heard of that? It's where people start seeing people's faces warp into demons. And it's like, are they seeing something in the spiritual realm or is it like a neurological disorder? And there's a whole question there. So we've covered a lot. We've covered a lot of stuff, man. We're just continuing to cover more. There's no shortage of conspiracy topics to talk about. And because we don't limit ourselves to like just government conspiracies, we'll talk paranormal stuff. We'll talk prophecy stuff, and we'll talk about all the different we love the variety that we've kind of given ourselves to work in.
Was there a conspiracy theory that before you looked into it, you were like, this is probably a load of crap? And then as you researched, you actually became a believer in that conspiracy?
Yes. And I'm trying to even think of a good example of this because I know I've done it a few times. Okay. I don't know if we covered this on our show. We didn't. We covered it on another show. I was a guest. Abby and I were guests on another show. But we talked about the Shroud of Turin stuff. And no. Man, I went back and forth on the Shroud of Turin for a long time. So the Shroud of Turin is supposedly the shroud that they covered Jesus with in the tomb. And the Catholic Church holds it up as something that survived, and it's got his face imprinted on it. And my eventual conclusion on this was, it's not blood, it's not paint, it's not this, it's not that. People have tested this for a long time. They can't figure out what it is. I think that it's I think it's similar to the Transfiguration, where it literally like burnt an image into the cloth, and I kind of think it's real. So I went back and forth on that for a long time. We talked about the Ark of the Covenant conspiracies, and some of them I think are stupid, and some of them I'm starting to believe in. Because,
like, give me an example of one you're starting to believe in on the Ark of the Covenant.
The Ark of the Covenant. We talked with Jim Barfield, who believes that he's decoded where some of these things are hidden, and I think his research is really good. And I listened to another guy, Michael. I'm going to blank on this guy's name. I don't know him, but I listened to his articles and read them. And back in last year in March, we started talking about the Ark of the Covenant. And based on the research we did, I said, I think that people do know where it's at. I think that they're going to uncover it. And I said at the time, I'm like, if that's going to happen, I think there's going to be a war in Israel this year. And that eventually this war will lead to the retaking of the Temple Mount. And I'm still kind of thinking that that's where this is all headed. So it was like 6 months before October 7th happened. That I was like, I think war is going to break out in Israel this year, and I think it has to do with the Ark of the Covenant. So some of those things I went in not knowing, but that's probably not the best examples, man. There's other ones I thought were crazy, but we've covered so much. Maybe it'll come back to me.
As we
Maybe
talk,
it'll come back to me.
do you have conspiracy theories that you have just absolutely enjoyed studying?
Yeah.
That you're like, these are good. And even if they're crazy, the content has been really fascinating for you to explore.
Well, I know that you listened to this one. So Atmospheric Beasts was that for me. I loved researching it. I think it was a fascinating subject. And it was the way that we do it, or sometimes it leads into so many other things that I'm just very curious to dig into. So like I found the Fortean Society through that, and some cool Hollow Earth stuff through that. And then, the flip side of that is there's ones I hate. I hate researching. That was Tartaria. Everybody who's watched our show knows that I hated it. But I wanted to, nobody before, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I mean this sincerely. No one before me covered that in a comprehensive and understandable way. There's a lot of people who only talk about Tartaria, and you jump into the deep end going like, what the hell is this? And they're jumping from place to place. It was the hardest thing to research because it's a collection of Reddit stuff, people who are believing a lot of false premises, and a lot of people who are giving interesting facts that they know are out of context. So to piece it together, and I did a 3-parter. It's like the total time of those 3 podcasts is like over 7 hours long, of like me diving into the deepest parts of the conspiracy and what it links to. That one, I'm like proud of the research, but it was I felt like I was going insane trying to like parse like what's real, what's crap, who's lying, why are they lying?
Yeah.
And in it, there's stuff that I think is fascinating and true, and most of it I think is kind of crap. And I found some cool stuff, but yeah, there's weeks I hate doing the research, and there's weeks where it's like, was the green jelly blob from outer space stuff was super fun.
Yeah.
The W56 cult in Italy was fascinating. Like there's stuff like that I love because it's got that mixture of like, here's something I didn't know, here's something that's hinting at maybe something true. And even if it's not, like the story is fun and it's fascinating. It's weird,
So are there conspiracy theories that maybe aren't true, but they're just fun that you'd enjoy? Like they're just enjoyable that you and Abby just had a blast talking about them? Like, give me some of those if you can think of any off the top of your head. I know I'm just kind of asking you to pull from this massive Rolodex of history on the spot, so there's no pressure. But I'm just like, I just think that my guess is the majority of my audience is not deep into the conspiracy.
Sure.
So if you had to just kind of like, not all conspiracies have to be.
None of them have to be true. Like some of them are just fun. They're good stories.
And they don't have to be government or evil. People got to get you.
Yeah.
Are there like, can you like recall any off the top of your head that are like, these are just kind of like fun conspiracies, like the green blob from outer space, for example, or like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
Star jelly is so much fun. It's really like a low impact. Like what you believe about it doesn't matter.
It's called star jelly.
Star jelly.
Okay.
So star jelly is a real phenomena.
Okay.
It's been documented for hundreds of years. And basically, certain times this jelly literally will rain from the sky, and nobody knows what it is. Like scientists can't tell you what it is. They can't prove it. Nobody knows what it is. But it's had some really strange occurrences throughout history. It's been talked about all the way back in the 1200s. There was a huge case of it happening in Washington, I think in the 80s. People got really sick, so they don't know if there's a correlation between the two. But it's so fascinating because even though there's scientists who will say, I know what this is, it has to be this thing, that thing doesn't match any description of it. It doesn't match any pictures we have of it. It's just that they can't let the world be weird. And star jelly's fun because the world is weirder than we think it is. Like the world is absolutely more strange than we're supposed to believe, because we live in this false enlightenment where it's like we think that science TM has literally answered every question. And scientists are so uncomfortable with the idea that they don't actually have the answer to every question. I think that's why Hollow Earth was fun for me too, because it's like, instead of just saying like we don't know certain things, or this set of data is weird, but we have to include this set of data to maybe get to a rational explanation, it's more along the lines of science has to say what I want it to say. It's become very, very religious.
Mm.
And it's become very exclusionary to certain data sets, certain facts, certain evidence. So whenever we can look into something that it doesn't necessarily matter what the answer is always, but like there's definitely sets of data that are verifiable, documentable, and it's being ignored. Like that's the stuff that I think is kind of the more fun aspect of what we do.
Yeah. So speaking of science, and give me the 2,000-foot overview for atmospheric beasts, because if you can recall, that was one of those. You said something in the podcast that I thought was very important to your argument. You said we always talk about the ocean as being X amount unexplored.
Yes.
But we never talk about our skies being X amount unexplored, and the different levels and different, layer, firmament and all that stuff. So
it wasn't that long ago that scientists were finally able to kind of probe the, which part of the atmosphere was it? The troposphere? No, doesn't matter.
Stratosphere,
no.
Troposphere, mesosphere.
Thank you. The mesosphere.
Look at the That's elementary science coming back. All right.
It wasn't that long ago. It was like 2019 even. I think that we were really able to probe the mesosphere in a way that we couldn't before. The air's too thin up there for flight, right? So like the only time you go through areas like this are, like space travel and stuff like that. It's just not a place that we've explored a lot. But what they're finding is that there's like plankton, there's like algae, there's like things floating way up there in the sky. And it starts to make sense of people who are talking about like these gas-filled sort of translucent jellyfish that have been an idea for a really long time, and there's a lot of sightings of them. It might even explain star jelly because it's got this like biological component of like maybe they've compared it to jellyfish. In fact, one of the scientific explanations for star jelly is that jellyfish get swept up into water cyclones, and then they go up into the clouds, and then they break down and come down in rainwater. So like even science thinks that star jelly is jellyfish. But there's an idea that there are actually a type of jellyfish that are eating the plankton that we know exists, or the microscopic stuff that we know
in the sky
that are cleaning it up, right? So like everywhere in you've basically got janitor creatures, for a better lack of term. You got like carp and things like that that clean
like
the bottom.
Invisible or.
Well, translucent. So like when the light hits them right, or when they do certain things, like they emit a gas. The belief is that they emit some type of gas that kind of propels them, but they're kind of like balloons, like they're kind of like these jellyfish things in the sky. And it's one of those ones that's like it doesn't matter if it's true or not, but I think that our world is weirder, and I think that because we're ignoring the data, that maybe there might be something there, and I think it's a pretty fascinating subject.
In your research,
that's like really
I love this. Actually interests me, that's why I enjoy talking about this. In your research with the atmospheric beasts, and as I was listening to your podcast, one of the things that I kept thinking about was before the flood, the firmament, and how a lot of people believe the firmament was this like water protected layer over the earth.
Like a snow globe.
Yeah, and so if you hold to that, it would make sense that there even potentially as remnants in the sky of the firmament, and there could be animals that lived in the firmament, water above.
There's water in space. I mean, there's water all kinds of places. There's water in the mesosphere, and we just don't know a lot about how it works. But
that was like my first connection when you said that. I was like, hey, I wonder, even if these creatures aren't alive today, there's remains left by. After God released the firmament to flood the earth, and the fountains of the deep came up, maybe there was creatures that lived above and below the earth. And it was the firmament and the mesosphere and whatever. Like I don't know. I have not done, this is like me just thinking through things. It's one of those things
where it's like, I could be definitely wrong about a lot of facts, but I think that the fact that that people are not curious enough to know. Yeah. Like science is not curious enough to know things that it doesn't already know. Or doesn't serve a certain purpose. And I think that, we've seen, if you take that there has to be a certain amount of UFO sightings that are true, that there's like statistically impossible that every single sighting is just a huckster or a liar. We've got professors and doctors and all kinds of like trustworthy people in society who've seen UFOs. Some of these UFO sightings that our own government looked into for Project Blue Book back in the 50s, they classified them as living creatures. They classified them as things that didn't act like a metal disc flight, spaceship, that they were acting like a manta ray or some type of ocean creature, and it looked like they were swimming in the sky. So there's definitely a possibility of something there. I think there's another famous scientist. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna forget his name. He was like the famous guy for like space stuff before Neil deGrasse Tyson. Anyway, he theorized that this was possible too back then. So
You have sky whales.
sky whales, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all throughout mythology too. Like I have to question when every culture's got a mythology that matches up, if they're describing real, like where's the source material? Where are they all getting the exact same ideas? Like dragons is one of those ones. Everybody has the same exact idea of dragons. Cultures that supposedly never talk to each other. So either they have an older connection to a pre-civilization that we don't know about, pre-flood, I would say civilization that we don't have we don't know a ton about, or the fact that they were witnessing things that they're all talking about, and we just don't have those same things anymore. Or I don't know. I give more credence to mythology than most people do. Not as in it's true, but like the ideas behind it come from somewhere.
Yeah, because if they had no access to feed off of stories,
Right?
But there were
They're having the
similarities.
same stories.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah,
it is weird.
I think
cool.
so. I mean, it's like fairies. Like everybody's got a story about fairies. They call them jinn some places. They call them different things in different places, but they're all the same characteristics, same stories.
You think what fairies are? What, angels, or like what?
We haven't done an episode on fairies. I think I want to kind of save my whole thoughts on it, but because I'm still researching. But no, I think let me just put it this way. I think that they are real spiritual beings, and then you'd have to ask the question: are they? There's theories that they're fallen angels. There's theories that's just straight up demons. There's theories that they were the stewards over God's creation, dating way back to different classes of angels. Like the Bible's not super. It's not a book of angelology and demonology. It's just not. Even the term angel just means messenger, and then we get little brief glimpses into different types of angels. But I think that if God made, like if there is a kingdom of other creatures, another dimension with angels and all that stuff,
spiritual realm.
Probably, I think the spiritual realm is probably seated as deeply as the earthly realm is, in that we've got how many millions or billions of different types of flora and fauna and creatures and all that stuff. I don't think that the spiritual realm is just there's cherubim and seraphim and God, and that's it. Like I think there's a lot more that it's not even necessary for us to know for like salvation or whatever, but I think it's a fascinating subject.
Yeah, I mean there's pillars, and then there's and the Bible talks about like there are times where you could be entertaining an angel and have no idea.
Right.
And I think that a lot of times we assume that's because, and I don't remember the passage in its context, so father or dad, if you I should know this, but like we assume it's because they'd be in human form.
Right.
Like that's the common assumption, like they're going to be as humans. And I don't remember if that's the context of the passage or not. I don't head, but I don't know if it'd be a stretch to say that there are things that we see that we can't. And that's the thing with I was talking to my wife about this recently, and I'm glad you mentioned this. There's this massive push with science that discredits the supernatural.
Right.
So it's like we have to make man-made explanations to this whatever we can't explain.
Yeah.
And if science was doing its job, they should never rule out supernatural.
Right.
Like that would actually explain.
Well, it's so funny because they kind of in a weird way acknowledge it, but they have to like say it in couch it in whatever sciencey terms they can to make it not sound that way. So I'll talk about time as a fourth dimension and quantum this and all of this, and I'm just like, sounds kind of like a spiritual realm, dude. It sounds kind of like
it's a little supernatural.
Yeah, a little supernatural. Like talk about spooky action at a distance, and they talk about all these things. I'm like, it sounds pretty supernatural to me.
Yeah,
sounds like we're talking about the same thing, but you're trying to do it in a way that it just
like
randomly happened.
Terminology, exactly. And they're just trying to discredit the spiritual. I mean, the Bible talks all the time about spiritual warfare happening all the time. And that's why I said, fasting and prayer and pray. And there's a spiritual war that's being fought for every soul. And so the Bible does touch on the spiritual warfare that's happening.
Right.
And so then you could take it as like, if there's a spiritual warfare happening, then there's also potentially other spiritual beings and things. And the one thing that is interesting, when you mentioned, so in Isaiah, it talks about, he saw, the Lord fill the temple, and it was this big thing. And then John saw these crazy beings with faces of lions, or, just like crazy.
Ezekiel saw a wheel within a wheel in the sky, and all these four-faced beings.
Just crazy, anyone that would, if anyone ever got a glimpse of those things, you'd think alien. You'd think, so people ask me about aliens.
Sure.
It kind of
we haven't even talked about aliens enough yet, and we're talking about conspiracy stuff.
Yeah,
we just talk about aliens, right?
Should jump in there.
Yeah.
I don't know enough. This is what I'd say based on my belief. No one cares about what I think. They care what PJ thinks. I'm gonna tell you guys anyway. I think God created the world. I think that God created every living soul, people that have souls only here on the world. And I think that Christ died for the people of the world, and that is it. But do I think that God created beings with intelligence, like, animals of some level? It's an ever-expanding universe that I don't think it's wrong or unbiblical for me that God could have done more. So I don't know.
I don't think so either. I've heard the C.S. Lewis arguments and things like that. I do think, though, personally, if you've ever read like Eric Metaxas's Atheism Dead, there's some really fascinating arguments around just how mathematically unique Earth is. Right. As far as like the more that you look at the impossibility of it ever existing. One person compared it to if a tornado went through a junkyard and randomly assembled a Boeing 747, like that's like the mathematical impossibility of what we're talking about here. And science keeps pointing to other stars and saying, oh, this could be like Earth if it was, 40% smaller, if it had this, if it had that. Like we have the Hubble telescope and we can't find anything else that can sustain life. So I personally think that the Earth is like that unique because of the creator. But I do also believe that people are not wrong when they're talking about aliens. And I think that they are, this is a long bit of research. This is a long thing here, but I'll just go a little unhinged here. I think that they're interdimensional beings, and I think that they're likely demonic beings. I'm not even ruling out.
What do you mean by interdimensional? Because I think a lot of people think of like Ant-Man and Quantum Realm. Like, what do you mean by interdimensional?
So this is a good question, because I think that people talk about interdimensional and multiverse and multi-world theory interchangeably, and I don't mean them to be interchangeably.
Yeah.
So multi-world theory literally comes from a guy who was trying to disprove God because of the argument I was just making, the creationist argument that the impossibility of Earth existing. And there was a problem in the scientific community. We're like, well, we can't have the only answer to how creation exists being that there is a architect behind creation, right?
Right.
So he creates this idea. He's like, well, look, if the Earth was just one instance, if you had infinite amount of possibility where this is just happens to be the one that everything aligned with, that's how you can explain away a creator. So like that comes from an atheistic place. I actually reject multi-world theory, whatever. But dimensionally, I'm thinking like we're beings in 3 dimensions, right? So we've got like a cube, you know what I mean? And the 4th dimension, so like height, width, depth, right? We can move in 3 dimensions. We move up and down and sideways and forward and backward. But the 4th dimension would be time. And we do move along time in a linear fashion, but we can't shift our perception of time. So like, it's a hard thing to explain, but imagine it, like a 2D being, like you draw a cube or whatever, but imagine then you could look at the cube from different angles, right? I think an interdimensional being would be something that can look at our world from another dimension. I think God looks at time differently. God is not bound by time. Not bound by time.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And I think that angels as well have more play in that dimension of time than we do.
Sure.
So I think it's a really weird. I'm still struggling with this, but like. Trying to explain it and how I think about it. But I do think that there is that aspect to these beings. I also think that, how deep do I want to go on?
Dude, you can get as deep. No. So I will stop.
I don't have an answer for aliens exactly. I just have thoughts and theories. So like, what I find interesting, going back to the Fae question, is that Fae were known for abducting people. Fae were known for
Who's Fae?
Fairies.
Fairies. Okay.
Fae, yeah, the Fae folk,
Sorry.
the fair folk,
Thank you.
fairies. Yeah, sorry. Fairies were known for moving around through the sky, doing bright, weird, colorful movements through the sky,
Sure.
and then abducting people.
Oh, cool.
Aliens are known for the exact same thing. I think that our perception of aliens is that what we are looking at is we're looking at spiritual beings, and they are presenting themselves in a way that our culture can understand. So to older generations, they presented themselves as, if you look back to Egypt, they presented themselves as kind of like bird god humanoids or cat god humanoids. And then you've got like the fae folk or the fairies, and they present themselves differently. And now we've got this perception that is very sci-fi. It's very B-movie from the 1950s. I think it's the same phenomena throughout all of history. I think if you look at the cases of all of these different things, they're acting in a similar way. Legitimate people are talking about them in a very similar way. They're doing similar things.
Well, because there's always been something.
Right. There's always people have always looked to the sky and tried to explain what that weird thing is happening. And I don't think that they're making it up. I think they're seeing a weird thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes sense that it would be some sort of spiritual being that can shape shift and make you like, it just makes it makes more sense than to me that there's it makes more sense that could be it than there are civilizations with green people trying to take over the world and disc starships coming here to abduct humans.
That is a story that also goes back to ancient civilization, and it's a story that was brought up at a similar time to. Let me put it this way: Mesopotamia had this idea of the Anunnaki, right? In the idea of the Anunnaki, I'll explain.
No, keep going. Yeah.
I'll explain it briefly. So, like, basically, it was the idea that aliens came down and created Earth as a biosphere to harvest gold and human beings or whatever, right? So they created us, they control us. We're just in this little prison planet, right? This theory comes up. This same theme comes up over and over and over again. This is why I think tackling this from a Christian perspective gives me a different take on this than the mainstream. But the idea is that the Anunnaki created us, but that they were created by another god who is evil. And this evil God just happens to share the name of the God of the Bible, right? Like the characteristics. And then you see this story again after the formation of the church. You see the story come up, and it's called Gnosticism, that we were created that the earth was created by this being called Yaldabaoth, and he created the angels, and that he's evil, and that actually even Jesus was not actually talking about, like, he came as a hologram to free us from the evil God, right? My point is the story, it's the same story over and over again. But what's interesting is that there's two options to this. There's to serve these sky god beings, these fallen, what I would think is fallen angels, right?
Yeah.
There's that option, and that option is that God is evil. We live on a prison planet. And then the Christian version is that God is not evil, that there are fallen angelic beings, and that they are messing with people, and possibly that's what we're thinking of when we think of aliens. We're thinking of things that are always, like, everybody knows that aliens are evil, right? Like, there's people who try to think they're not, but like the people who research aliens deeply are like, dude, they're abducting people, they're possessing people. Like, they're possessing, they're possessing people, they're abducting people, they're ruining lives, they're mutilating cattle, whatever it is. Like, there's some kind of evil being in the sky. I just think it's the same story over and over and over again. We've got, like I said, the fairies, the Anunnaki, whoever the Egyptians worshipped. People have been worshiping beings coming down from the sky. Even Native Americans worship beings that came down from the sky. They said they came from the stars. So I think that what we're looking at is like fallen angel religions. And I think that all the UFO cults, whether you talk about Raelianism or whoever, are all doing this and saying the same thing. It's funny because, like, they all have their bent on it. But the more I study it, the more I realize, like, there's really there's worshiping Yahweh, there's worshiping the God of the Bible, and there's worshiping these fallen fallen angel deities is what I'll just call them, whether they call themselves Anunnaki or they call themselves whatever Raelians called them, but they're always evil. I think that it's so clear to me that they are evil, so I don't know how off on a unhinged tangent I
dude,
got there, but that's my belief on aliens. I think that they are. I think that there's a lot more to it than that's like the briefest version of it. But I think that they have to do with fallen angels.
You know, people in America, when you talk about demon possession and demons and, you know, fallen angels, you kind of get like this, they're like, yeah, okay. You know, like, you know, it's like some people, like not the people that are in the conspiracy world. I'm talking like the average, you know, person that be like, bro, like, come on, like, it's not demon possession. They might see it, but we don't see it. Like, unless you're looking, like, Satan doesn't need to do that in America. We have so many distractions that he doesn't necessarily need to have these very clear, like, witch doctor people doing crazy things. So, and I say that to say, so I went to the Philippines back in 2012. And if this story wouldn't have been told to me by people I trust, I would have just called it a bunch of phooey. You know, like, this doesn't make sense. But, you know, there were 3 occasions where my friend named Kim ran into demons. And one was, and I'm going to butcher this story because it was told to me over 10 years ago. But basically the premise of one was she was very sick in the Philippines. She was laying in bed and then all of a sudden felt this uneasiness in the room. Covers lifted off her and just felt this uneasiness. So she called Pastor Mike. They prayed over her and it went away. Second scenario, they were preaching the gospel in some like hard to reach place. And this girl's eyes started to like actually like the actual eyes started to take over her whole face as they were preaching. And this girl was demon possessed. Yeah. And basically they called her like they I command you to leave. Ever like, and the girl went back to normal. But like, these are people that I trust. Yeah. And things like that are happening. You have witch doctors that are practicing actual demonic witchcraft. Oh yeah. So, but we in our Christian or no, we're in our American culture.
We've westernized Christianity. Yeah. That's the problem. And I don't mean that Western Christianity, but like the enlightenment and things like that, we've taken the spirituality out of a very spiritual thing.
Right. That's my point. Like 100%. That stuff is happening. So so when you say that there are spiritual beings in the sky, that like some people like that makes more sense. I know to me.
I sound crazy. Like this is the thing about the show.
But you don't. No, you don't. Because to me, that actually makes way more sense than.
I'll tell you a piece of evidence that nobody in the UFO community denies. In fact, I've listened to lots and lots of atheist UFO commentators, researchers comment on this, and they don't know what to make of it. Now, I know what to make of it, but it's the fact that if you command an alien to leave in the name of Jesus, they do. They flee. They flee. And on top of that, they possess people. How do you explain possession from a being from Xenon 9 or something like that? Like they literally possess people. They do if you've studied demonology, if you've known people, and I've seen demon possessed people, and I know exorcists, and I know people who have worked in this field. If you listen to their stories and then you listen to survivors of alien abductions, it's the same story. And that's why I say they're presenting themselves, because Jacques Vallée, an atheist, one of the most prolific researchers of the UFO phenomena, said something. He's like, I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in God, but it is supernatural. It's spiritual. I don't know what to make of it. People are being possessed. People are doing things that you can only describe through a spiritual or biblical lens. And he didn't know what to make of it, but he's like, whatever this is, it's connected. It's the same phenomena as demon possession. So Jacques Vallée, an atheist who's studied this, just kept coming back to this. These beings are not just purely physical beings from another planet. They are something beyond that. And the idea that we've taken it to be, it's just beings from another planet. But again, that's the
science doing the science thing, right?
But it's a deception, I think. I think it's a deception that we have taken the spiritual realm and so had to make it fit into a sci-fi, science TM can explain it away realm, that we've lost sight of what it truly is. And I think that's where people are deceived around aliens is I think that they have craft. I think that they're physical and spiritual. I think all of those things for a lot of reasons, and it's way too much to get into now. Yeah. But because I've looked at the evidence, but I think that we're missing the fact that these are evil spiritual beings.
Mhm.
And I think that when you've got the top researchers all kind of coming to that conclusion, then not knowing what to do with it, that's why I think when you bring that light of Christ into this realm, into this darkness, into this rabbit hole, it starts to make sense in a way that is uncomfortable.
I mean,
to
it
people
could
who
be the
don't
missing
wanna
puzzle
see.
piece, right?
I think
Like,
it
it's-
is. I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really. Yeah, we could. And like we said at the beginning, man, just the ability to think through things rationally and
Mhm.
question things. It's an important thing to do,
Yeah.
you know? And I think you don't sound crazy. To me, you make more sense than a lot of the craziness that I've heard. And, you know, when I've done little minimum research on aliens, stuff
Mhm.
like that. I think also, this thing about time, and we'll slowly start wrapping up here, but have you guys discussed the theories of time travel, wormholes in space, and things like that?
It's so funny because last night we were saying we need to do more with time travel stuff, but
Yeah.
like barely. I mean, a little bit. It's definitely something I think going into season 5 that I've realized it's one of those things we haven't hit on a lot. So once in a while, we'll find an area of research that we want to build a foundation on to do further episodes. Season 4, a lot of it was like religious stuff. Before that, I think season 2, a lot of it was like, who are the Greys? Who are the lizard people? Who
Yeah.
are the Pleiadians? Like, what is the UFO phenomena? What are the Foo Fighters and how they have to do with Nazis? Like, what was up with aliens during World War II? Like, so we have those moments. I think time is going to be a big thing for us coming up because we've got good friends who are really into this research and have a lot of interesting things to say. One of the wildest stories that ever came out on our podcast came from a friend of mine, Alan Aguirre, where he literally tells a story, and I believe this man, and I believe all the other people who I know who witnessed to this story. They showed up to a town, and they didn't realize, like shouldn't have been there in the middle of nowhere, and they were taken care of, and all of this stuff. And then they went, they were on tour, bands on tour, and they broke down in this town. This town had this huge youth resort, something like that. And it was awesome. And then they went to go back next year because they're like, these people took care of us. It was a great place. We played concerts for these people. There's this big youth camp. It didn't exist.
No.
So then he talked to the people who owned it. And he's like, what happened? Did you go out of business? Did this, like, what is this? And they're like, the guy broke down in tears and said, I've had a vision to do that for a long time. We've never done it.
No.
So the only way to explain it is that they time slipped into the future. And that this guy eventually built this place because he was told by people who had been to the place that he was going to build it. And I know 5 at least people who were there who all attest to the same story. And I believe them. I toured with them. I was a musician on the road with these guys, and they all told me the same story. So I think time is weird phenomena that we don't fully understand. We're moving forward, but I like on a linear path. But I think that there's times where that's broken, and I think that God can break time, and I think that's what He did in that instance. I don't know if breaking it is the right way, but like He controls it, right?
Slip through.
Hey, man. Well, it's something we don't control, but God does. So
it's like the theory in space when they talk about wormholes, and they believe wormholes can do like interdimensional travel to help you cross. It's you have like the thing where it's like. Yeah, you guys have seen this graph before, I'm sure, and I'm sure you've seen this graph before. I'm gonna get my science.
Get some science going on.
But like, if you've seen this graph before, right, where it's like the wormhole connects from point A to point B, we travel
along the curve.
But if there's a way to get from point A to point B by shortchanging that curve, in a sense, that's time travel. And so a lot of people believe that wormholes
are bridging the
gap from point A to point B. So this might take 100 million light years to get here, and this could take a year,
right,
or whatever. And like that stuff, I don't know if you guys could see that stuff. Fascinates me a lot because I don't know. I'm too stupid to actually like follow that stuff, but that's an actual visual thing that makes sense to me.
Right.
I'm like, okay, if time is a linear thing. But instead of us viewing it like it's a playing field, we actually view it like more like it's waves.
What if it's a Fibonacci spiral? What if there are times where we circle back around and we're close to like those gaps in time, those spaces in time, and who knows, man?
Did you hear the Terrence Howard podcast that everyone was freaking out about on Joe Rogan?
Yeah, I did.
I listened to most of it, and I listened to they brought a super smart guy back on to like challenge him on a bunch of ideas, and basically that it was kind of, this stuff's a load of malarkey. But a lot of what he was saying was like it was true, but he didn't have the schooling to give it scientific names.
Yeah.
So he was making up names for things that actually did exist. He just had done.
People will throw you under the bus if you do that, but it's because I think they want to ignore sometimes that it's not just the PhDs who are the arbiters of truth. That sometimes we can know truth and recognize truth, and maybe we give it different names. But it's also like the lowest tier of like, I can debunk you because you used the wrong name for the right thing.
Correct. But he talked a lot about waves and how everything's done in like circles and waves. And so then and again, I don't know.
Right.
But I was like, and as I was watching that, I was just finished watching Interstellar. And so I was like, what if time instead of a linear is more of a wave? Because even if it was, again, this is just future stuff for you. And I'm an idiot talking. But if in theory, time was like this.
Yeah, you'd have
and
times
you could have
along
times where you could jump instead of traveling along the.
Or maybe there's a bleed through effect, right? So like maybe the year 1984 comes along at a similar point in a wave to 2024, and that bleeds over, and we see like the Mandela effect. Who knows?
Good stuff.
Yeah, man.
Good stuff. If you want someone that can always, I love the whole thing that gets me excited about conspiracy theories is the freedom to just think. And there's probably more educated people that are listening to me and be like, Dillon, you're retarded. That is the stupidest thing.
People think I'm retarded all the time.
And it's fine because it's just a fun, it's like, I admit that I don't know anything, but the ability to think critically without judgment and just actually, it's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I just think time would be a unique thing for you guys. So if you do that, as I follow you, that'd be a fun thing to listen to.
I'm sure that we're going to get more into time stuff in the next few months. So.
Dude, I can't wait. Well, I always give my guests an opportunity to plug whatever you want to plug, anything new that's coming up, anything exciting that you want to share. This is your opportunity.
All right. Well, yeah, obviously you guys can follow us anywhere. If you go to conspiracypill.com, we put articles there, our videos are there. One thing that I would love to plug is I've wanted to make my own card games for a long time, and I finally actually did. We made a card game called Abduction Go. You can go to abductiongo.com. And it is a really fun, it's like 20 to 30 minutes. You can play with 3 to 5 people. It's based on UFO abduction phenomena, specifically the whole cattle mutilation, cattle abduction thing. So it's kind of it's funny, but it's also a very fun and addictive like game to play with a few friends. So if you like good card games and something that's conspiracy themed, that's really fun, cattleabductiongo.com. Other than that, just follow us, on Rumble. This is a big thing. All of our stuff is there. Follow us wherever you can listen. And not every episode is going to be for everybody, so feel free to just pick and choose which ones you like, and maybe you'll listen to all of them. I don't know. The weirdest thing to me is that when people, they don't talk to us. Like, they're in our chat, but they don't talk to us for like months. They're like, okay, I finally have listened to every episode you guys have done, and now I will like talk, like message you or comment in the live chats. I'm just like, that's wild to me that people go back and listen to every like they literally like it's a series they got to binge.
Get caught up before they can.
I think it's
but that's a good point. So you guys live stream your shows.
Yeah, Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Yep. On
Rumble, on YouTube, or where?
Rumble always. I can't guarantee we'll be everywhere else, but definitely always on Rumble.
Perfect. So. Well, check them out. Please go follow and your Twitter socials everywhere. I'll link everything in the description. So is that PJ_unhinged. It's hard to find anything that worked. Yeah, we'll link everything in the description. So please make sure you check out the description. Dude, this was, my brain works like this, where a guest says something, and I'm like, well, I now want to know more on this. And we could just keep, I'm kind of bummed because I wanted to talk about the Skinwalker Ranch stuff. Oh, man. Maybe we'll just go have cigars and talk about that in a second. Yeah. And we'll have you back for a second podcast. But if you guys enjoyed this conversation, you guys will absolutely love Conspiracy Pilled. I said this at the very beginning. PJ and Abby do their research. It's not one of those things where like today's conversation was just me kind of like, we're just throwing ideas. Sure. On Conspiracy Pilled, they bring like the receipts. They show up with what their data is, where they got their information from. It's an absolutely fun environment.
It's meticulous. You asked me. I want to actually answer a question you asked me earlier that I didn't get to
On the
answer.
elevator,
If that's
yes,
all right,
please.
You asked me how I have the time to do it. Some episodes I'm listening to every podcast, video, anything I can all week while I'm working my normal job. And for the last couple of weeks, I got up at 3 a.m. and literally was putting my notes together from 3 a.m. till 7 p.m. when we streamed, like nonstop. So like I'm meticulous about this stuff. I'm like obsessively like I want to make sure that I've done my research, that I can come to it knowing what I'm talking about. So it's not a turn on it's not a push a button record and that's all it's done podcast. It's very a lot of research.
Yeah.
A lot of research.
And it's one of those that you really want to kind of watch the video for if you can on Rumble, because it's good to listen to, but there's a lot of visual. And I had to stop listening to it on like Spotify or whatever I was listening to it. And then I had to pull it up on the ones were on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because I could actually, because a lot of times you'd reference, okay, this picture or this thing.
Yeah.
So it's just good. Just pull it up on Rumble, pull it up on YouTube, whatever you want, and watch it. It is good, and I'm so grateful to Joel Berry he actually told me about Abby first.
Sure.
And then
he's known Abby for a long time. I met him last year, but he's a great dude.
And then I followed Abby on Twitter, and she didn't follow me back. That is passive aggressive, Abby.
I want
you to know that was very passive aggressive for you. And then I was like, "Oh, PJ's sick," and you responded, dude. And it's great. So we're gonna grab some lunch.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you guys. Please like, subscribe, share with a friend. Let us know your favorite conspiracy theory, your favorite part of the show. Please follow them at Conspiracy Pilled. And dude, appreciate you. Thanks for coming on the show.
It's great. Thanks for having me, man.
You got it, man. All right, we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Dillon English Show. Have a good one. Cool, dude.
That was fun.